Hi everyone, I'm Delia, and a couple months ago I was accepted into Sheridan's Bachelor of Animation program for the class of 2027. This was my second time applying to the program, and I was rejected last year with a score of 80%, so I am really glad that I was able to improve on that this year. Between my last portfolio and this one, I did second year of Visual and Creative Arts at Sheridan College, as well as receiving a lot of tutoring and feedback on my portfolio. I couldn't possibly make this video without mentioning Sophie. She was my primary tutor through both of my portfolios, and her Instagram is on screen, so I highly recommend checking out her art. I really loved looking at portfolio videos when I was applying, so I've been looking forward to making my own for ages. So let's jump into my score sheet and the portfolio that I submitted this year. I was lucky enough to receive a score of 94% on my portfolio, which was so unexpected. I lost marks on my hand drawings, character rotation, short animation, and storyboard, while receiving full marks in figure drawing, perspective line drawings, aka layout, and personal art. The cutoff marks change every year, but this year as a domestic student, I needed a score of 91% to receive admission, or a 90% if my GPA was over a 90. Luckily, I slipped in with a nice amount of wiggle room, but international students, on the other hand, had to score a 95% or higher to receive an admission offer, due to there being less spots in the program for people coming from outside of Canada. This year required a submission of 2 short poses and 2 long poses for the figure drawing section. I received full marks, 10 out of 10, on this section, which I do feel was maybe a bit too generous. Up on screen here are my short poses. In your short poses, Sheridan likes to see gesture and movement from what I've heard, and Visual and Creative Arts, the program I was in, was so helpful for figure drawing this year, as I had a 3-hour life drawing class every week, as well as any life drawing that I did on the side. Figure drawing is one of those things you have to put a lot of time into to improve on, so being at Sheridan this year helped to give me access to some consistent life drawing opportunities. Here are my long poses. I feel like these are a bit weaker compared to my short ones. I've heard they want to see a lot of structure in these poses, which I do feel is lacking a bit in these, especially on the pose on the right. My understructure could have been a lot more visible, I think. I would recommend to any applicants to attend in-person life drawing rather than online, and just being patient with yourself as you very slowly improve. It takes quite a long time to see visible improvement with life drawing. Here are my hand drawings. This year, Sheridan wanted 2 poses, an anticipation and action pose of a hand throwing a small object. The first hand drawing I used is actually the same one I submitted last year, yet my score actually went down from a 9 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10. I did these drawings in Col Erase, which is an erasable colored pencil, which I really recommend. I tried my best to break down the poses into basic shapes, and that helped me a lot as well. This is my character rotation, which scored a 14 out of 15. My character's name is Maestro Mortimer, and I love him dearly. Breaking him down into basic shapes and using alignment lines was really helpful here. I think if I were to make some changes, I'd try to keep the feet a little more consistent, as well as problem solve his side fluff pieces, since I don't love how they rotate. This section took me around 60 hours, so it's really a lot of trial and error when making a rotation. This is my short animation. I scored a 14 out of 15 on this section, and we had to use the provided character of a juice box. So I set up this fun little picnic scene where the juice box gets scared by a gathering of ants. Giving the object some character here I think is a really great thing to do. I wanted to show some personality. I'm not really very good at animating, but referencing the ball bounce arcs as well as using a lot of squash and stretch helped me a lot here. Here is my storyboard. The storyboard section is worth the most out of all the portfolio sections, being out of 20 marks. I got an 18 out of 20 here, which I'm really happy with. This year we had to board a story in 4 panels using the provided character of the possum and with the prompt, better safe than sorry. It's really important to show a variety of shots here, including a long shot, medium shot, and close-up shot. I tried to show some of the understructure in my characters here to show that I was breaking them down into basic shapes a little bit, and I also used some tone on possum, foreground elements, and the skate park bowl to break things up visually as well as draw some attention. I tried to show Possum in a variety of poses and expressions to show that I understood his character well and was comfortable drawing him. In this section, it's very important for your story to be understandable without text. Profs should not have to read your action lines to understand what's happening. I was actually very panicked after submitting this because I realized I'd forgotten Possum's tail in the second shot, but luckily people assured me that it wasn't too noticeable and could also be interpreted as an intentional choice to make the composition better. Now on to layout. I scored full marks here, and for this section we had to submit both an interior and exterior drawing. This is my interior, which was done in 2-point perspective, and I wanted to channel some Gravity Falls vibes here and tell a story of a little girl stumbling across an abandoned basement full of investigative work and photos. I tried to really get a solid foreground, midground, and background in my layouts because that's really important, and trying to minimize tangents as well. I did both of my layouts in grayscale, which I think personally helped show depth here quite well. However, that's not mandatory at all for submissions. Something I'd really recommend is being conscious of line quality, like having thicker lines in the foreground to very thin lines in the background. I know it seems very simple, but line quality was something I personally struggled a lot with last year, and I think it really affected my previous layout score. This is my exterior. This was meant to show a criminal stumbling into a forest full of wanted posters for herself, very Flynn Rider-esque. I was repeatedly told that this was a really weak point in my portfolio, so I was quite worried with submitting this. A lot of my object placement was driven more by trying to fill space than purposeful storytelling, and I think the composition is not as strong as it could be. If I had more time, I honestly probably would have gone with a different idea for my exterior and redone this piece. I'm glad it worked out in the end, but I do wonder if my 15 out of 15 was primarily driven by my interior submission. Both these drawings took a similar amount of time and were done using Procreate's perspective grids, which I rely on a ton. Now on to personal work. This is definitely the section I feel most proud of. I got full marks here, which I'm very happy about. And compared to my 11 out of 15 on personal work last year, I was just really coming into this with a thirst for revenge. I had a staff member at Sheridan tell me that personal work is often cross-referenced with your other submissions, so I think this section is maybe more important than it lets on sometimes. I really wanted to have a very animation industry focused personal work section, and really this was all catered towards my portfolio rather than being true personal work. It was basically like a second portfolio that I made. This first piece is a character lineup of a story concept I have, and I really wanted to emphasize that I am a very story-driven person and I'm actively creating worlds. The second piece was my attempt at diversifying my work a little bit. It's a layout that I first 3D modeled in Fusion 360, which is a software by Autodesk, the company that made Maya. I then painted this layout in Procreate. I don't think this piece is particularly strong compared to my other submissions. However, I think that intentionally labeling it so that the profs knew that I was experimenting in a 3D space could definitely have helped me here a little bit. I have heard multiple times that the Sheridan profs like to see 3D work, which is definitely not something that I'm super inclined to, but I still wanted to include a little something here. This is my third submission, which was a layout PDF. I submitted 3 layouts in that PDF, and the first one was meant to be a clone lab with an escaped patient. I started working on this layout right after I finished my first portfolio, and I really love adding hanging objects in the foreground of my layouts. It's a personal preference, but I think that the foreground framing in this piece is a strong point. This is my second layout. An earlier version of this was actually my interior from my last portfolio, which scored a 12 out of 15. I really spruced up the line work to include it here, and I do think the composition is maybe a little empty, and I could have told a much more interesting story with the objects that I included in this piece. I know some applicants aren't comfortable resubmitting work from previous portfolios, which I completely understand. However, in my case, I felt like it was worth doing. Side note that I also labeled these layouts with story titles. I just felt like this made the story behind them feel a little more developed. And this is my third layout for that submission. This was also a resubmission. This piece was my exterior from last year. I feel like this still holds up pretty well despite being pretty old now. I do think that grayscale lends itself really well to exterior layouts due to the amount of depth you're often showing, especially in this piece. I think it shows quite a lot of depth. You can see in the bottom left corner especially the thickness of the lines that I used in these pieces, as well as the line variety used. This was my sketchbook PDF submission. Sketchbook PDFs are not mandatory for this section, however they're quite common, I think. These first 2 pages are just some exploration work for these little treehouse designs I was playing with, and some animal observations. These animal drawings were from the Royal Winter Fair, an agricultural event in Toronto that Sheridan actually sends its animation students to each year for an assignment. I wanted to show the profs my enthusiasm for observational drawing and that I was actively going out and drawing from life in my free time. Something that I tried to do in this submission and the rest of my portfolio too really was sort of begin and end strong in the work that I displayed. So I put my favorite work at the beginning and end of any given submission, and then put anything I'm a little less crazy about in the middle. These are the third and fourth pages in my sketchbook PDF. On the left are some little watercolor men I did the night of submission at around 10:30 or 11 at night. These were all from Pinterest and were just super rough and fast. I'm not too unhappy with these, however, I do wish I was more careful about the lighting in these photos because it's pretty rough. On the right is a bit of a mishmash page. This was just some miscellaneous work I submitted. There's a really rough layout concept I did, just some color palette work, character sketches, and a Medusa illustration I made. And my fifth and final page in my sketchbook PDF is just some people drawings. I love people drawing wherever I go, whether it be out with friends or in public transit. I just threw together some examples of this for that page. I really just think drawing from life is a great thing to implement into daily life as much as possible, and I'd recommend it to anyone really. These drawings are either in pencil or in a fountain pen. And my final personal work piece is a 2-page PDF of some story concept development. This story is called Anti-Christmas, and it's an idea I've played around with since high school. It was originally a poem by my mom and then a short film by me and my friend, so an animated version felt like the next step. Here I included a very simplified and brief explanation of the concept. I wouldn't recommend including a whole lot of text in your submissions. Generally, the profs should just be able to understand your stories based off of what you've displayed visually, so text shouldn't be super necessary. I included just a little bit of character development for the main character Fiona, a little silhouette work, and an isometric room drawing that I could use as an aid in doing any storyboarding or beatboarding. Displaying my work in a visually pleasing way was something I focused a lot on this year, hence doing the little title and the lines going across the page. I really just wanted everything to feel very professional looking. This is the second page of my anti-Christmas development. Here I just included a mock-up of a poster for the short film and 6 not super great storyboards. I didn't have time to properly board my script, so this was sort of a space filler in the last few days before the deadline. I just wanted to show that I was developing this concept in different ways and forms, and that I had stories and ideas that could be developed further if I got into the program. Wink wink. So yeah, those are all of the portfolio pieces that I submitted this year. I'm so thankful to have gotten into the program, and I'm really excited to start this new chapter. To anyone wanting to apply to the program, I'd like to emphasize that I am not by any means the best artist. Sheridan Animation is a competitive program that in my opinion requires a bit of strategy and planning in order to have a successful portfolio. Although getting in purely on your own is possible, I would recommend seeking outside help and eyes to give feedback on your work. Obviously, having a solid art background is important too, which is why I would really recommend regular life drawing and people drawing in public, and just creating and consuming media as you go. But I still stand by the fact that if I had just whipped out a portfolio without any outside help, I don't think that I would have been accepted. Getting feedback from artists and non-artists alike is really valuable and will help you catch problems in your portfolio early on. If anyone has any questions about my portfolio or Sheridan or anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out. My Instagram is here on screen. I'm also going to be offering some one-on-one tutoring for applicants to the animation program, so if anyone is interested in that, just DM me. I recently dipped my toes into the world of art education and redlining and all that fun stuff, and I'm hooked and would love to help any of you. Before heading off, I'd like to mention that everything I said here is based off of my own personal opinions and experiences, so please take all that I say with a grain of salt. I'm still learning and growing as an artist.